On Sunday, October 9th, 1978, a 14-year-old named Greg Holman was with friends at the Agua Park in Scottsdale. Another kid in his class, also age 14, named Jon Benson, walked up and invited everyone back to his place to party. Everyone else declined, but Greg said that he'd go along, and the two of them left the park and headed to Jon's. That would be the last time that anyone saw Greg alive. Later that evening, Greg's mom came home and found a note from him saying that he had to get out of the house for a while, but that he'd be back soon. This was not unusual for Greg, but still concerning enough when he didn't come home that his mom began making phone calls to his friends, trying to find out where he was. His bike was found at Agua Park, but no sign of Greg. When Greg did not show up for school, his mother called police. Police interviewed Greg's friends, other students at the school, and the last person that Greg was seen with, Jon Benson. Greg was a 9th grader at Samora High School in Scottsdale. He enjoyed riding his bike, hanging out with his friends, his girlfriend, and spending time at the park. He was well-liked, a good student, and a role model. Greg was known to stand up for other students who were being bullied. Jon Benson was 15 years old. He was kind of a weird kid. He gave girls the creeps. He would wear a top hat and a cape around. He called himself Captain Outrageous, always asking if anybody wanted a party. Jon Benson, when interviewed by detectives, didn't offer any information. He had to be asked. He failed a polygraph test, kept his answers short, and denied having anything to do with Greg's disappearance. But police knew that he was lying, and he became their number one suspect. After interviewing a lot of students, friends in both Jon's circle and Greg's circle, and others, detectives began to hear rumors about Benson accusing Greg of taking something from him. One teenager said that he had heard a rumor that Jon had killed Greg and put his body in one of the underground forts on the nearby reservation, but he didn't know where it was. Out on the reservation, there were underground forts where teens would hang out and party. Detectives searched some of those spots on the reservation, but found nothing. A couple years later, in 1981, detectives talked to Jon's old friends again. They said Benson was so mad that Greg stole a bong that he had threatened to kill Greg. Some of his friends said that he had a dark side after witnessing and beat the crap out of his brother who made him mad. They interviewed Benson, who was now 18 years old. He denied anything and everything. However, he did say, "If I told you what happened, everyone would hate me." Before leaving the interview, he told the detective that he would call him the next day and talk more about it. He never called him back. Friends of Greg would say that he never took anything from Jon Benson. Over time, different detectives would take on the case, as others would move into different positions in different areas of the department. A couple years later, in 1986, a tip came in that Greg's body was buried behind a Circle K on the reservation. When they checked, they found an underground fort behind the Circle K, but no body was found. Greg's mother became an outspoken advocate for families of missing children. She knew that Greg did not run away. Sadly, she developed cancer and died in 1988. Greg's father would die in 1992, both not knowing what happened to their son. About a month after Greg's father's passing, Greg's sister called detectives. She had been talking with her brother, and she said that she found it strange that no one ever checked the fort in the backyard of Jon Benson's home. Detectives were unaware that he had a fort in his backyard. Police discovered that Jon Benson's family had moved long before, and that the fort was filled in. But they got the search warrant that they needed, and they began digging. Digging in the backyard of the former Benson home, they would find a skeletal torso. While this made news, during the dig, someone would spray paint the word bones on the wall of the home where the bones were found. Police would interview the Benson family, now living in Tempe. They both said, the mother and father, that they had no idea how or why bones were found in the fort. The father said that he caught his son drinking and filled in the fort in 1979. They did not know where Jon was at the time. They hadn't talked to him in a while. Months later, it was confirmed. Those bones were those of Gregory Holman. The investigation now turned to homicide. On June 26, 1993, a funeral service was held for Greg Holman. He is buried next to his mother at the Green Acres Mortuary and Cemetery in Scottsdale. With his remains identified, detectives began interviewing Greg's friends and other classmates again, and anyone they previously interviewed. The DA reviewed the evidence and refused to go forward with an indictment. Greg's disappearance would appear often in the newspaper. Years later, in 2006, another detective would take over the Greg Holman case. Detectives would come up with a plan to interview everybody once again, including those that they had not interviewed before, who at the time were just a few years younger than Greg and Jon. After doing a few interviews, police discovered that now that enough time has passed, those who were afraid to talk were now beginning to talk. And the truth about Jon Benson finally came out. What they discovered is that Jon Benson was sexually abusing other boys in his fort, luring them, getting them drunk or high, and forcing himself on them. Jon Benson was a rapist. He was a sexual predator. For many years, no one talked about it, but now the truth was coming out. And detectives discovered that one of the victims, when they asked him, "Did you tell anybody that this was happening to you?" they said that they told Greg Holman. Greg Holman was the kind of person who would have done something about it. And they think that when he walked off with Jon, the day that he disappeared, that he was going to confront him about it. In January 2008, Greg's remains were exhumed and re-examined again. Detectives did not have to look far to find Jon Benson, who at that point, he was in prison for parole violation following a conviction for attempting to lure a child into a sexual act. Once again, he denied knowing anything about how Greg's bones ended up in his fort. They were not able to prove how Greg was killed, so they could not charge first-degree murder. But Benson ended up taking a plea deal to a manslaughter charge, and he was given 8 years because he was sentenced as a minor. Jon Benson would serve his 8 years. He never disclosed anything about Greg's murder or where the rest of his remains are. And as of today, yeah, he's free.